Okay, 4.4, this is our review for quiz number 5, the halfway quiz for semester 2 college algebra. We've got two main topics here, law of sines, law of cosines. Got to know the formulas, got to know when to use which one, you got to know how to draw them. Okay, a hot air balloon is tethered to the ground by two taut strings. So you've got, a hot air balloon that looks something like this. So this is your hot air balloon. It is tied to the ground by two strings. Okay, we'll do something like that. So you can see where there's a triangle that comes into play. Line 1 is over here. This is 100 feet. Okay, so this is line number 1. And there's also line number 2. Let's see, first of all, I know that line 1 makes an angle of 80 degrees with the ground. Okay, and line 2 makes an angle of 40 degrees with the ground. How long is line 2? So they're asking me to figure out, what is this one? That's line 2 over here. Now, in order to know what to use, law of sines says you must have an angle and an opposite side. Law of cosine, you either have to have 3 sides or 2 sides and the angle in between. Okay? Here, the only thing of those that I have, if I look, I can see that I've got an angle and an opposite side here. That means use the law of sine. So I'm going to have to write this out. 100 divided by the sine of 40 is equal to what I don't know, x, over the sine of 80. I will cross multiply. You get 100 times the sine of 80 equal x times the sine of 40. Divide both sides by the sine of 40, so you get 100 sine of 80 divided by the sine of 40, and that will equal x. So go to my calculator, 100 sine 80, 100 times the sine of 80, and then divide that by the sine of, it is 40. And I get 153.2. So that tells me, so x equal 153.2. So that means that it's 153.2, and those are feet. Okay, that is how long line 2 is. Okay, so the key here, draw a triangle, and then looking at that triangle, knowing what information you have and which of the laws apply. Now we've got a triangle that we are asked to solve, triangle ABC. It doesn't matter how you label these angles, okay? So I'm just going to do A, B, C. You could do it differently, but once I label them, then that tells me that this is side A, this is little c, and that is little b. If angle A is 112, angle B is 12, and little c is 23. Okay? So I know angle A, that's 112, angle B is 12, and side little c is 23. Okay? I need to figure out all of these. Now remember, if you know 2 angles, you already know 3 of the angles, because 180 minus 112 minus 12, so that's 180 minus 124, that is 56. So that tells me this angle is 56 degrees. So I've got 56 degrees here. And now what can I use? I can use the law of sine, because this is the opposite side and its angle. So I can use that to use the law of sine to solve for each of the sides. So angle C I just solved for. That was right here. That's when I did 180 minus 112 minus 12 equal 56 degrees. To find side A, okay, So I know that A divided by the sine of 112 is going to be equal to 23 over the sine of 56. And so if I cross multiply, A times the sine of 56 equal 23 times the sine of 112, or A equals 23 sine 112 divided by sine 56. So 23 sine 112 over sine 56. So 23 times the sine of 112 divided by the sine. So sine of 112 over sine of 56. And that is 25.72. So A is 25.72. So 25.72. And now to find B. Same process. B over the sine of, what is angle B? 12 is equal to 23 over the sine of 56. So that's going to give me B times the sine of 56 equal 23 times the sine of 12. And so B is equal to 23 sine 12 over sine 56. 23 sine 12 over sine 56. So let me just do a shortcut here. You'll put that in the calculator. 23 sine 12 over sine 56 is 5.77. So B is 5.77. So we've solved all sides of the triangle. Here I had to use the law of sines because I had a side in an opposite angle. Each wing of the B-12 stealth bomber measures 105 feet. The wingspan of the bomber is 172 feet. What is the angle at the tip of the bomber, the nose of the plane? So here's a case where you see a triangle. Okay, it should be very obvious to you. Here is a triangle. In this triangle, I know three sides. I know none of the angles. The only thing that will work is the law of cosine. Okay? So the law of cosine, so what I'm going to need to solve for, I'm going to need to solve for this angle right here, okay? So that means with the law of cosine, I'm looking at, here's the angle on opposite side. Anytime one of those is missing, I've got to use the law of cosine, okay? I can't use the law of sine because I don't know this information. I don't know the opposite angle on the side. So with the law of cosine, I'm going to start with this side. So 172 squared is equal to 105 squared plus 105 squared minus 2 times 105 times 105 times the cosine of that angle. Okay? So that's just using straight up law of cosine. So if I look at this, I need to solve, I've got to solve this for cosine of theta. Okay, so this means 172 squared minus 105 squared minus 105 squared equal minus 2. 105 times 105 times the cosine of theta. If I divide everything by negative 2 times 105 times 105, let's just do that. Then I get 172 squared minus 105 squared minus 105 squared over negative 2, 105, 105. That is the cosine of theta. Okay, so you just got to be real careful when you put this in your calculator. Okay, so I'm going to put this in my calculator. I'm going to use parentheses. So I've got, what was it, 172. So 172 squared minus 105 squared minus 105 squared. Okay, that is the top of my fraction. So I'm going to end the parentheses and then divide it by. I'm going to start another parentheses. What's the bottom of this fraction? Negative 2 times 105 times 105. So it is negative 2 times 105 times 105. That is the bottom of that fraction, okay? So if I figure out what all of this is, that is negative 0.341678. So cosine of theta equal negative 0.3. Let me write that down again. 0.341678. And 341678. You don't want to round this off to 0.34. You only want to round off at the very end. So cosine theta equal this number. That means that theta equals, you got to use your inverse cosine function. Take the inverse cosine of that number right there. Now in your calculator you can just say trig inverse cosine, and on this cursor I can just go up and grab that number right there and then hit enter, and I get 109.979. With degrees we're going to round up to the nearest, so that's 110 degrees. So it tells me that the angle is 110 degrees. Okay, so theta equal, what is it, 109.979. So that is about 110 degrees. Okay, so guys, there's a lot of writing here, a lot of numbers, places that arithmetic mistakes can be made. But once you get the trig down, it really becomes just the algebra and arithmetic. So be really careful, and you've got your calculator to do a lot of your work here. Solving for a triangle. Triangle ABC. So if this is A, this is B, and this is C. Angle A is 32 degrees. So 32 degrees. Side B is 6. So this is 6. Side C is 11. So I've got that. Now if you look at what I know in this case, I know two sides and the angle in between. Okay, so that means that I can use the law of cosine. So this is side A. First thing I want to do, let's find out what side A is. According to the law of cosine, A squared is going to be equal to 11 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 11 times 6 times the cosine of 32. So A squared is 11 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 11 times 6 times the cosine of 32. So let's go and figure out on the calculator, what is 11 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 11 times 6 times the cosine of 32. That is 45.0577. So A squared equal 45.0577. That means that A is equal to the square root of that. So on my calculator, I would just go grab that number right there, and I will say, what is its square, sorry, let me back up. I have to do the square root first. What is the square root of, and let's just pick that number right there, so 6.71. So A equals 6.71. Okay. Now I've got to solve for angle B and angle C. Okay. So in this case, if you look at what I know, and like I said, one of our rules, once we start with the law of cosines, we stick with the law of cosine. So I don't switch back to the law of sine. So I've got to find angle C and angle B. Okay. I'm going to use law of cosine to find one of them, And then once I have two angles, then I can figure out the other one pretty easily. Since I've got more room over here where C is, let's use it to solve for angle C. So according to the law of cosine, if I'm looking at that side, I know that 11 squared has to equal 6 squared plus 6.71 squared minus 2 times 6 times 6.71 times the cosine of the angle that's in between there, which is C. So now it's just a matter of solving this for angle C. So 11 squared minus 6 squared minus 6.71 squared over negative 2 times 6 times 6.71, that equals the cosine of C. So I'm going to put this in my calculator. So it's 11, 6, and 671. So it's a big fraction. So 11 squared minus 6 squared minus 6.71 squared. That is the top of my fraction, 11, 6, and 6.71. So 11, 6, 6.71. And then all of that is divided by parentheses, negative 2 times 6 times 6.71. Negative 2 times 6 times 6.71. And let me back up. I think I may have a mistake here. That's my fraction divided by parentheses, negative 2 times 6 times 6.71. And all of that is negative 0.496472. So cosine of C equal negative 496,472. 496,472. Double check that. That was 496,472. Again, you don't round off until the very end. Now to solve this for C, C is equal to the inverse cosine of that number. So the inverse cosine of that number, just go to my calculator, trig, inverse cosine, bring back that number that I had right there, and that is 119.7. Round that to the nearest, that's 120. So that's about 120 degrees. So angle C is 120 degrees. Now for the easy one, find angle B. So that's going to be 180 minus 120 minus 32. And that is going to be, I think, what is it, 28? And I'll just double check it after all of that math. 180 minus 120 minus 32, and that is 28. So 28 degrees. Okay. So a lot of work here, putting a lot of things together that we've done using law of sines and properties of triangles. And then let's look, we have a couple of word problems. So Atlanta and the Dominican Republic are 1,430 miles apart. A pilot flying the students of the class of 2018 from Atlanta for spring break finds that he is 500 miles from Atlanta, but 800 degrees off course. How far is the plane from the Dominican Republic? So you are starting in Atlanta, okay? And so you're trying to get to the Dominican Republic. And you know that that is 1,430 miles. But your plane starts off and it goes for 500 miles, okay? And it finds that it is 18 degrees off course. But you still need to get to the Dominican Republic. So this is what we got to figure out. What is that side over there? So what do we know? When I look at this triangle, I do not know an angle and opposite side. I cannot use the law of sine. So when one of these pieces is missing, then I look and see, well, I know two sides and the angle in between. That's the rule for a law of cosine. If you know two sides and the angle in between, you can use the law of cosine. So applying the law of cosine, x squared is going to be equal to 500 squared plus 1430 squared minus 2 times 500 times 1430 times the cosine of that 18-degree angle. So it's just a matter of putting all of that in the calculator. 500, 1430, and the 18. So what is 500 squared plus 1430 squared? Make sure that's the right number at 500 and 1430 minus 2 times 500 times 1430 times the cosine of that 18-degree angle, and that is 934,889. So x squared equal 934,889. So x is going to be the square root of that. So just go back to my calculator, and what is the square root of that number that I just had on my calculator? So 966.89. So 966.9 is what it looks like. So we are about 966.9 miles from the Dominican Republic on that flight. Okay? And the last one here. The church tower at Pisa has been leaning for the last 500 plus years. It has been proposed that a zip line be installed to go from point T to point Z. How the tower makes an angle of 106 with the ground at point B, so that's 106 degrees. Okay. If the tower measures 190 feet from point B to point T, so that's 190, and the base of the zip line creates a 40-degree angle at point Z, okay, how long is the zip line? Okay, so if I look at this triangle, it looks like what I know here, I know an angle and an opposite side. So here's the opposite side. That's sort of hard to see, 190. So I know this side and this angle. So by knowing an angle and opposite side, I can use the law of sine. And it looks like I want to solve for how long is the zip line. There's my zip line right there. So I know that x divided by, this is law of sine, so x divided by the sine of 106 is equal to 190 over the sine of 40. Cross multiply. X sine 40 equal 190 sine 106. X is equal to 190 sine 106 over sine 40, and I just go to my calculator. So 190 times the sine of, what was it, 106, and then divide that by the sine of 40, and that is 284.14. So 284.14. So that tells me that the zip line is 284.4, and that's been measured in, what was it, feet? Okay, and that is it. So guys, not a lot of material. Two things, law of sine, law of cosine. But there are a lot of concepts you've got to keep straight in your head, specifically about which rule to use. Okay, you can only use the law of sine in this particular problem, and you have to know how to apply it. So the formulas will be there, but you've got to know how to apply each one. Okay?